Okay, so we will start with meditation. I have to mute this one thing. Great. Please come to a comfortable sitting position, and if you feel comfortable, you may close your eyes and bring your body to a resting position. And hear the birds chirping and the sound of the gong fading away. Notice your shoulders, spine, the facial expressions. Adding a gentle smile to your face would bring up a wholesome attitude in your mind. So please give yourself permission to change the posture anytime, mindfully, with full attention to your body and with also loving kindness toward oneself. Now we transcend any worries and troubles from this day, this past week. Allow your awareness to discover the pattern of your in-breath and out-breath as they happen. So anchored there in your breath coming in and breath going out, your awareness becomes established there and remain. All you have to do is to know what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, and direct your mind toward what is wholesome by simply being with your breath. You are able to allow things to be, accept, and move on with every new experience that you didn't know was coming. Now apply a little bit of wisdom to all sensory experiences. In the seen, there is only the seen. In the heard, there is only the heard. In the felt, there is only the felt. In the thought or cognized, there is only that. There is no you, there is no story building. They just fade away into the unknown. Knowing thus, we have a pleasant abiding here and now. In that pleasant abiding, you may reflect on these words of wisdom that the path is there is no traveler. Liberation is there is no one enters into it. The path is there is no traveler. Liberation is, but there is no one enters into it. Now you are on your own until you hear the sound of the gong to conclude this sitting. You can now come out of your meditation and open your eyes and stretch. So we have the reading part for today. This is from the Mahā Saccaka Sutta, the middle length discourses of the Buddha, number 36 out of 152 discourses. This one has the story of the Buddha's Buddha to be's self-mortification experience, his personal experience. And since this is the month about his awakening that we celebrate in every place, I thought we can read this part together and discuss and see how he discovered the middle path. So let us read, and let me share the screen before we read. We read together. So that way, as we read, please catch words that you think are interesting and phrases that are interesting, and also maybe we can discuss them toward the end. Okay, let's start. I thought, what if I, clenching my teeth and pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth, were to beat down, constrain, and crush my mind with my awareness? So, clenching my teeth and pressing my tongue against the roof of my mouth, I beat down, constrained, and crushed my mind with my awareness. Please don't ask me how to do that. We abandoned this practice and we don't have to do that, honestly. Just as a strong man seizing a weaker man by the head or the throat or the shoulders would beat him down, constrain, and crush him. In the same way, I beat down, constrained, and crushed my mind with my awareness. As I did so, sweat poured from my armpits, and although tireless persistence was aroused in me, and unmuddled mindfulness established, my body was aroused and uncalm because of the painful exertion, being harassed by the exertion, by the painful feeling that arose in this way, did not invade my mind or remain. So his body was affected, but the mind was not. So that means he was talking about both the how recluses those days were developing the body, not the mind, and some focused only on the mind and gave up later. So both parties, both those who developed the body through various practices, they gave up those practices and started developing the body again by eating and doing stuff um, like that. That means just lavishly eating, and so what they previously abandoned, they went back to it, and that didn't help them in their pursuit of awakening. And in this case, he did this kind of self-mortification to with the intention of um, crushing the painful feelings that his mind experienced and the body experienced, thinking that any feeling, whether it is meditative or not, were bad. Um, and what he, I think I will bookmark that in my mind, and I will bring that later. Let's read to see that he didn't give up here, and he went on doing this. I want to hear you read, so I feel I don't feel horrible in my reading. I thought, what if I were to become absorbed in the trance of non-breathing? So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths in my nose and mouth. As I did so, there was a loud roaring of winds coming out of my ear holes, just like the loud roar of winds coming out of a smooth bellows. So I stopped the in-breaths and out-breaths in my nose and mouth and ears. As I did so, extreme forces sliced through my head, just as if a strong man were slicing my head open with a sharp sword. Extreme pains arose in my head, just as if a strong man were tightening a turban made of tough leather straps around my head. Extreme forces carved up my stomach cavity, just as if a butcher or his apprentice were to carve up the stomach cavity of an ox. There was an extreme burning in my body, just as if two strong men, grabbing a weaker man by the arms, were to roast and broil him over a pit of hot embers. And although tireless persistence was aroused in me, and unmuddled mindfulness established, my body was aroused and uncalm because of the painful exertion, being harassed by the exertion, but the painful feeling that arose in this way did not invade my mind or remain. So, how he did the wrong kind of breathing. Later, he introduced the kind of breathing that was more pleasant and had so much mindfulness, like we did, like we started with today. Let's continue reading. Devas, on seeing me, said, Gautama, the contemplative, is dead. Other Devas said, he isn't dead, he is dying. Others said, he is neither dead nor dying. He is an arahant, for this is the way arahants live. So this shows that divine beings were part of his invention, I would say, and um, they saw, they bear witness to his exertions, and um, and the word arahant is an enlightened one, existed at the time. It's not a completely new word introduced by Buddhism that the society was expecting an appearance, a rising of a pure enlightened being in that society. Um, and let's continue. I thought, what if I were to practice going altogether without food? Then Devas came to me and said, Dear sir, please don't practice going altogether without food. If you go altogether without food, we will infuse divine nourishment in through your pores, and you will survive on that. I thought, if I were to claim to be completely fasting while these devas are infusing divine nourishment in through my pores, I would be lying. So I dismissed them, saying, Enough. Okay, let's read more. I thought, if I were to take only a little food at a time, only a handful at a time of bean soup, lentil soup, veg soup, or pea soup. So I took only a little food at a time, only a handful at a time of bean soup, lentil soup, veg soup, or pea soup. My body became extremely emaciated. Simply from my eating so little, my limbs became like the jointed segments of a vine stems or bamboo stems. My backside became like a camel's hoof. My spine stood out like a string of beads. My ribs jutted out like the jutting rafters of an old run-down barn. The gleam of my eyes appeared to be sunk deep in my eye sockets, like the gleam of water deep in a well. My scalp shriveled and withered like a green bitter ground gourd, shriveled and withered in the heat and the wind. The skin of my belly became so stuck to my spine that when I thought of touching my belly, I grabbed hold of my spine as well. And when I thought of touching my spine, I grabbed hold of the skin of my belly as well. If I urinated or defecated, I fell over my face right there, simply from my eating so little. If I tried to ease my body by rubbing my limbs with my hands, the hair rotted at its roots, fell from my body as I rubbed, simply from eating so little. So he's saying, don't do this. So let's continue reading. People on seeing me would say, Gautama, the contemplative, is black. Other people would say, Gautama, the contemplative, isn't black, he is brown. Others would say, Gautama, the contemplative, is neither black nor brown. He is golden skinned. So much had the clear, bright color of my skin deteriorated, simply from eating so little. So, contemplative is the word for Shramana or Samana in Pali, a famous, well, common word for recluses who do contemplative practices those days. Let's continue reading. I thought, whatever contemplative or Brahmins in the past have felt painful, racking, piercing feelings due to this striving, this is the utmost. None have been greater than this. Whatever contemplative or Brahmins in the future will feel painful, racking, piercing feeling due to their striving, this is the utmost. None will be greater than this. Whatever contemplatives or Brahmins in the present are feeling painful, racking, piercing feelings due to their striving, this is the utmost. None is greater than this. But with this racking practice of austerities, I haven't attained any superior human state, any distinction in knowledge or vision worthy of the noble ones. Could there be another path to awakening? So that's the end of today's reading. And I've added a little bit, just a couple of lines from another reading I did. And this says, the painful, this is from Venerable Narada, Sri Lankan monk, who wrote about, what's the book's name? This is Buddhism in a Nutshell. So about this experience, he says, the painful, unsuccessful austerities which he strenuously practiced proved absolutely futile. He was now fully convinced through personal experience of the utter futility of self-mortification, which weakened his body and resulted in lassitude of spirit. So he gave up on these practices and he asked monks to give up that kind of self-mortification, and this is why that he has in the discovery of the middle path right view as number one. the wrong view misguided him so much, so that he almost lost his life. And
Mm.
you may have seen the images of him with just a skeleton, almost down to a skeleton. And this is in Asian mindset, this brings so much samvega, the urgency in their hearts that he went through this for us, like the way they look at Jesus Christ, that image, he went through that to free us from suffering. And that people would offer flowers and say sadhu with their joint palms with the same um, urgency that we should strive like our head is on fire. And this is why in the discourse of radiating loving kindness, the Buddha says, dittincha anupagama, not coming into erroneous views, that standing on spikes will liberate you, standing on one foot will liberate you, raising your hand and keeping it that way will liberate you, and eating little will liberate you. In one of the discourses, he says he's praised for eating little, and he says there are some of my students who even eat less than me, and then they should be praised. So don't praise me. He looks at not what he eats or any of that. He looks at mental purification as, and also not believing all the lies that the mind created as a way of reaching a kind of awakening that is also free of lust, hatred, and delusion, and that he is that way liberated from all the wrong views and wrong practices, and has, at the end of this discourse, especially, this person comes to argue with the Buddha. Saccaka came to, he's from the Niganta tradition, the tradition of naked ascetics and that lineage. And they contributed so much to growth of Buddhism with this presence they had. And perhaps Buddhism also contributed to their growth. But the Buddha abandoned extremity, and that way Buddhism survived somewhat outside of India. I mean, compared to Jainism, that they survive, but not so much outside of that culture. You can see in my recent trip to India, I saw naked ascetics on the streets, and that culture, they have wealthy patrons there, and they very much love to see that kind of recluse. But in the Western culture, this is not so much accepted as a social norm that is accepted. So I'm not criticizing their practice. I love that they exist in the world for us to still see, and that they have their own reasons and liberation ways. But we monks don't have that kind of extremity that we are told to abide by the laws of that country wherever we go. So we visit that word of the Buddha. Um, but speaking of austerities, we don't even have that for us. It's not the kind of food, like I said, that liberates us. Eat enough to maintain the body, but see the falsehood of certain mental constructs and liberate yourself from the mental prison. And that way, choose to speak right words. So, in order to do that, there needs to have right concepts in the mind. And with right concepts, right thoughts, we naturally tend to not get upset for praise or blame. Like in the end of this discourse, this ascetic praises the Buddha for not getting upset for every counter question he asked. what he says is that it's a long discourse, but toward the end he says, other teachers were very angry when I asked these questions, and he names a few, but your skin color did not change. And this is a sign that the Buddha not only speaks this Dhamma, but he lives by it. That when he says he's not provoked, his mind is not provoked by anger, others cannot know. He says others are in war with him. He is never in war with the world. World is in war with him, but he's never in war with the world. Um, and it is speaking of that mental purity he gained. Um, and he he simply says if someone tries to put anger into his mind, it is like someone trying to give a gift to him, and he would say if he doesn't need that gift, it belongs to the giver of the gift. So no one can give him that kind of gift of anger. It's just like that. It just disappears. So he he even says toward the end in the discourse that when asked why do you take naps in the afternoon after the meal, he says, I do. Um, but the Saccaka uses the question, is sammoha, like going into delusion? The Buddha kind of justifies how he earned this nap, you know, by saying that I don't go into delusion mentally when I take that nap. My mind goes back to where it was, to abiding in a pleasant abiding of emptiness. So that's how I translated that whole encounter. Like he justifies how he earned this nap. It's a beautiful, beautiful response he gave. So, any questions? Anything interesting to in your observations so far in the reading? Oh, Daniel, do you have anything to share? Okay. Yeah, yeah, it is. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. No one enters. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. 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 Um, at the end of saying this, he says he recalled when he was a young child in his father's plowing ceremony. He remembered entering to a meditation, and he thought, why do I fear the pleasure I gain from meditation? That is wholesome pleasure. And this is where his self-realization started to happen. And he needed to regain his energy to do that. But his peers abandoned him at that point, saying he's going back to eating again. They, so he explains how he went to previous teachers, that they taught something that he practiced, and he became equal to them, and they positioned him in the position of a teacher. But he he wasn't happy, because he kept, it's like washing something and putting back in the mud. It just seems to be never ending. So he felt the need to really find a permanent solution. So that's what I bookmarked earlier, that he visited that experience as a child, how his mind went to meditation and entered into the first jhana, in which one abandons pleasure and pain, but regains a kind of meditate pleasure, pleasure born um, happiness and pleasure born of seclusion. He says there is no reason to fear that. And in the second, people translate it as absorption. In that level, there is pleasure and happiness born of meditation itself, samadhi, stillness of the mind. And he thought there's no, and so it goes into 4 stages like that, ultimately coming to equanimity, and then that is a very purified, balanced state of mind that he directed toward discovering of past lives and discovering of how beings are born and disappear and then born again, that knowledge, and how defilements uh, can be cleansed completely. Um, since you said about how the graphic comes, I, I've seen people also get into grief reading this. This is, and also the same grief is associated with Prince Siddhartha leaving the palace and Yashodhara, his wife, weeping his departure. And I see in my own mind, now I don't see those things that way. I um, I see that um, perhaps it is just the knowledge that these are dependently arisen at the moment when conditions are present and then they disappear. Like the meditation we did, there's the path, but there's no traveler in it. And I think meditating on these things help us that way quickly, right? To our reading and then the meditation together support us to get to a quick understanding that this too shall pass. Anything, Andy, from your side?
I was really struck by just uh, how little the Buddha cared for external praises
Yeah.
with the devas with
Hmm.
or coming. And his austerity was in a way, it was some people's eyes like decorations that are going to testify the
Yeah.
depth of his spiritual achievement. Uh, but the Buddha was just brutally honest with himself.
Yeah.
It's like I'm not, I'm not arrested.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
liberated.
Mm-hmm.
And so he just, yeah, at the end of the sutra, it's just like there has to be another way. And
Yeah.
he's just so honest, like
Brutally
it's an
honest. Yeah.
experimentation. He's like
Yeah.
like a scientist, like an inquirer.
Yeah.
Doesn't stop at other people's recognition.
Right.
Only if he himself is not.
Exactly. If it is not coming from his own heart, and he knows it's not genuine. And in his first sermon, he says, until he discovered the 4 truths, that there is suffering and the arising of suffering due to craving and the cessation of it and this eightfold path, he did not declare that he has awakened to the truth. Coupled with that was the knowledge of the dependently arising dhammas and the cessation of the dhammas. Also, he was not focused on the external beauty of his body in this encounter. That, like sometimes no one would want to go through that kind of suffering, because any time he could have had a heart attack and died. Fortunately, he had a youth where he practiced martial arts at home, and perhaps his body was able to withstand this kind of torture, uh, which saved him for us to the world. That is there. So, yeah, this is brutally honest too. That he says his inner heart that he did not want to be labeled an arahant, uh, an awakened one, because he knew he was not. This was a painful, very, very painful place to be. Any movement that he did, even blinking of his eyes, must have tortured his body. So he needed both the balance of the body and balance of the mind. And in some discourses, he says, Matanyutaj bhattasmin, come to knowing the quantity of the food you need. Eat one meal a day if you can, and that will be beneficial for you, that you will live without any ailments, without any sickness, because your body just burns what you eat and eat. So just no craving there. And in other discourses, he tasted food, but he had no clinging toward food. Those elements appear. Like I almost want to put these experiences like of him together to say what the Buddha did, because there are books like what the Buddha said. Um, but what did he actually do? What made him him? So it's, these days I'm so fascinated with these stories. At least once a year we visit his Buddhahood. Yeah. Anyway, so anything else? Shall we wrap up? Anything from you, Dan?
No, I'm good. Thank you. I was,
Great.
as usual, it's always
Yeah.
very good. The nice combination of the meditation and the story. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, let's share merits then. May the suffering ones be suffering free and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief. May all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power share this merit of ours. May they long protect the teaching. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So have a pleasant abiding this evening. Happy
Have a
meditation.
peaceful week.
Have a great weekend also. Thank
Okay.
you. Until
Take
next
care,
time.
all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.